All right, welcome back to Moms Makin Dough. This is your next episode, and today we're going to talk about becoming a smart saver. The reason why I used to have literally get allergic to traditional advice of that traditional advice being you need to spend less and save more. And, while I think that is valid, I also think that there's that, doesn't really tell you, how do you go about doing that? So today I'm gonna dive into an exercise that I, call one of my money rituals. It's an exercise that I do really about every quarter to kinda check in on what I'm bringing in and what is going out. And I wanna tell you a little story just to kick it off. Just probably last month, going into the holidays, Ryan and I had some time off. He's my husband, and, we talked about how one of our targets was, we really had to have more communication on our personal finances beyond the business finances. So the business finances were very, consistent with what we talk about and what we cover. And managing that, I do what we call management Mondays, where we meet together, and then I also will do some a lot of quick hits on things I need to get off my money to do list when it comes to our businesses. But one of the things we realize is that we didn't do this on a regular basis on with our personal finances as a couple. It was something that I really did myself, and just kind of told him what was going on. And so one of our targets for this year was to get a little bit more organized with our personal finances. So I'm sharing this today coming from a place of where I decided I was going to start. So, as I said, this is an exercise that I typically started out doing for my business, but I really think it will help you on your personal finances. And we are going through it this month. So I wanted to really just start by starting here on what that looks like. And so when I think about spending less and saving more, I think all of us, unless you are very naturally a saver, I find that all of us tend to go one side or the other. We either tend to come from a money blueprint where saving was really emphasized, and or we come from a money blueprint where spending was always just happening and it was sometimes with an afterthought. Personally, I come from I laugh about this all the time because I think about it, but my grandmother, who was one of my biggest supporters and best friends, um, was really one of the people I got a lot of my money blueprint from. And she had such amazing advice at times, but also really shitty advice at times and bad examples. But one of the things that I always think about is that we went into, if I'm going to date myself, but I'm probably guessing it was like Ames or Bradley's, which was a department store, probably the equivalent of like a Kmart, or maybe even I think Kmart's bankrupt, probably like a Target today, right? Like a store that has everything. Prices are cheap, so you tend to spend more. It's I mean, if you're like me, I can't go into Target without spending $200. So, I don't do that very often anymore. But I tend to see that a lot of people, the more money you make, you tend to spend and increase that level of what you spend as well. So, that is also just not so much a belief I have, but one of the things I've experienced with not only myself, but with other people I've worked with. So the reason I'm bringing this up is my grandmother used to take us to all, pick up things at Ames or Bradley's. And I remember this one time that I went in there and I bought this plaid dress. If I had to guess, it was purple and teal plaid. And this is where I started refining my sales skills as a really young kid. I really sold her that I would wear this dress every day if she bought it for me. And she did end up buying it for me. And the funniest part is I really need to find this picture. But I did wear this dress almost every day. Um, as long as they would let me, including some days it needed a day off to be actually washed. But I remember doing my school pictures. I'm guessing maybe 5 or 6 years old in this picture, and I can see it so clearly in my mind. And this is the day that I remember I came home and my mom said to my grandmother, "Why'd you buy her a new dress?" I could hear the conversation. And, my grandmother in her little, like, she's very witty. She's like, "Oh, well, you know what? You can't take Kendra Spendra to Ames or Bradley's," whichever it was, without, her getting something. And I thought about it, I was like, "Holy shit." I was like, "This is something that, like this is an old habit dying hard." And here's my mistake that I'm working on correcting for myself this year too, is that I have a 4-year-old daughter, and she's also I'm starting to expose her like, "Hey, we can go to Target." And then she's like, "Can I get a toy? Can I get this?" And trying to really start to define what I'm going to teach her when it comes to money, which is going to be a whole other episode that I'm working on creating as we speak. But today I want to focus on the mindset and the habits of, spend less and save more. Because let's face it, right now, if you are a really good saver, with inflation, that money that you are saving today is not going to be worth the same amount it is in even a couple months to years from now. So I think there's a lot of conflicting advice out there on like, if you're saving, what should you do with it? So I'm going to really start today with just an exercise that I wanted to go through that like I said, is one of my money rituals. I have 3 or 4 money rituals. I'm gonna do an episode on that just as well, but this is one of them that will be on that episode, and it's what I call the statement audit. And audit is not really a positive word, but it is a word that I want to use here, because that is basically what I've called the exercise. Because if you want to become better at saving and let do less spending, that requires that you also need to know just how much you are spending at the current moment. So today we're going to talk about how I figure that out. And it's a little bit of a non-traditional way. And then we're going to talk about what you do with that information. So the statement audit. The statement audit requires you to print out your bank statement. Now, this should be your primary bank statement. Like if in your business, it's probably going to be what's called your operating account. But when we're looking at personal finances, this is gonna be, like, possibly a joint account. It is the one that, like, all of the major bills that you need to pay come out of. So we're gonna do an audit on what we're spending first. So to do that, we're gonna take print out the statement, physically print out the statement. I know we are living in a day and age where almost everybody does everything online. And I'm one of those people that have multiple bank accounts for very specific reasons, which again, I will talk about at another time. But I want you to print out that statement that would be what you call either your household account or your operating account. If you don't have one account that all of your major bills go through, that would be a start, is that you're going to set up that account from this episode. But what I want you to do is print out that statement for the last month. Now, we're in the month of January. So I'm just prepping to do this for January for my personal side, as well as I do it for my businesses. But what I want you to do January, if you're listening to it regardless, or the month before, is you just don't want to pick a month that has more randomized spending, such as like December typically has a lot of end of year bills, and or Christmas or holiday type bills. So you don't want to pick one. You want that month. You want to pick a month that's very like, this is very a normal basic month for me. So in my case, I just did this right now with picking the month of January. Even though we get a couple days left, I have a really, really good idea. And then what I'll do is I will set some time aside to really balance it this weekend. So here is this takes probably about an hour, but it's really mind-blowing what you can get out of it. So the first thing that you're gonna do is you're gonna take a couple different color highlighters. I like this to be a little bit old school. And the first highlighter you're gonna have is a green one. And the green one, you're gonna go through once you've printed out your statement, and you're gonna write all of your necessities. Meaning these are things you need to live. This is things like your mortgage payment, your rent payment, your car insurance, your I put food in this category, but food that's not eaten out. This is food like basic groceries, and get an idea of like, hey, here is what I am spending on the necessities I need this month. The next category is going to be a yellow highlighter, and that is going to be negotiate. So I call them the three N's. So we have the necessities first, need to negotiate second. Negotiation things are going to be like things like your cable bill, apps you have subscribed to, but maybe you're not really using anymore. Um, and memberships that you don't use, insurance that is like maybe a little bit like it needs a revisit. When I look at negotiate on insurance, like sometimes I look at like even like I review our life insurance policies and that sort of thing, making sure I have enough coverage, but I'm not paying for something that actually isn't really valuable or I could get a better rate on. Um, this is also gonna be the big one in this category is gonna be credit cards. Most people are like, "You can negotiate credit cards?" Yes, you can negotiate credit card rates. And I also in this category, I write down like all of my cards that I currently am using, what their, fees are. Like, do they have a yearly fee, and when does it run, and is it $800 or is it $80? Because when you get those cards, I feel like often if you do not revisit them, you forget what they are, what their rates are. And sometimes you get ones with special rates or special offers. And here's where the credit cards become really powerful is that like I keep a spreadsheet, just a Google Doc, it is not fancy, of all of my cards that I'm using when I use them. Like I have some that I use when I travel only, because they have different perks for doing so. Like I don't know if any of you know this, but like if you put your a rental car on American Express and it gets damaged, American Express will cover and add additional insurance for it. I actually had side note, but I had a we went on a trip, and the last day of our trip we had a tree in a storm fall through our back windshield on our rental car. And what was awesome is that we had this is where ironically had Amex, an Amex card that we had put this rental car on, and they covered the damage for it, beyond our insurance. So just little things right there that you wanna start to, like, to look to negotiate. Things that you are maybe paying for. One that I have in this category for me this month is, like, our cell phone bills. So, like, our cell phone bill, it's been a while since we've looked at it. We're probably up for upgrades, all that kinda stuff. I need to go through that and be like, "Hey, when's my bill? When is the date that that agreement is up?" And I'll kind of do some digging on like, hey, what's the better rates? What's the better supplier? Is it worth it for me to do that? So, those are types of things that you will negotiate. I do not personally use this myself, but I have had other people tell me that there are apps out there now like Rocket Money that allow you to like upload and all of your memberships, and then you can kind of view them all in one screen. So this is kind of a ninja trick on the audit, that you can view them in one screen and then figure out if you want to eliminate any of them. And you can actually click through the app and cancel them, which I thought was really amazing because I don't know about you. Again, even going through my first month of January, like the first few weeks, there's two or three memberships on there that I have completely forgot that I had. Um, so just really thinking about those, what are those things that you could negotiate, and not eliminate, but negotiate and maybe get a better rate on. Nice to have is the third category. So we go from necessities, highlighting all of the necessities we need in green. Then we go into the negotiate, which is yellow, which is kind of like the caution of like, hey, keep an eye on this, or, get a pulse on where this is at, see if you could do better. And then the last one is going to be the nice to have. And the nice to have. Now, this is where like clothing that isn't necessity falls into. This is where eating out falls into. When I did this last quarter, it was the end of third quarter that I did this. And so we had just gone through the summer. And one of the things that I noticed is that we actually did really much better this year on eating out over the summer. And we kind of saved up for times that we knew we were going to be away where knew we would eat out in multiple times, like a weekend away or a long weekend or going to a concert. And we kind of pulled back a little bit on the constant or consistent date nights where we would go into like nicer restaurants. And so we would still do our date night, but we would get a little bit more creative where it was like, hey, let's do takeout tonight instead of go to a sit down dinner. And or let's do a cook at home and have a babysitter or Lily sleep over someplace else. So just really nice to have is like a nice dinner is nice to have, but I don't need to have it every week and it to be a $250 dinner. Because that doesn't align with what's important to me. And I always like to say what the biggest thing with this exercise that I find is that like if I am your coach and I say, "Hey, show me your bank statement," which the reason I do this exercise is I had a coach that did this with my business. And the first part of the exercise was how did you feel about showing a person where you were in your finances? And the second part of it was actually the part that we're going over now, which I've added to and refined for my personal finances because I found it so, so helpful in our business finances. So, but I always say if someone looks at your statement, they will be able to see what you value because money is going to follow value. Like when you deliver value, money is exchanged for it. So, this is just telling you what are the things that are really important to you. In my case, it's mostly food, mostly learning. Like I spent one of the things I cleaned up last year was just like the amount of books I bought in terms of like physical books. Like I love a physical book. I like to highlight, I like to take notes. It's a dog-eared. Ryan, my husband, never likes to read my books because he's like, what is going on in this ADHD book of notes, right? But the reason that I bring this up is that this is also going to show you like and reconfirm for you what is really important to you when it comes to where you spend your money. Because I like to say that although I support saving, I also want you to spend strategically, right? So save smart, spend strategically. I feel like should really be the advice, not the traditional advice of save more and spend less. That's not something really most people want to work towards. It's also something that most people are aware of, but they don't know actually how to turn into action. So I'm hoping that doing this exercise will help you start to determine, hey, where do I enjoy spending my money? Where could I maybe clean up or eliminate some of it, some of my spending? And that brings us to the next part, which is the saving part. And when it comes to the saving part, I like to break it into four categories here. Now, again, this is also going to be traditional advice that I think has some good foundation to it, but not the bones that I would like to see in it. So I'm going to share with you what those things are and what the bones are that I've added to it. Just like I said, switching my belief system about I need to spend less and save more into I need to spend smart or spend strategically and save smartly. So those things are this. I divide my savings targets and I work backwards. And I divide them into a couple categories. One is that I want to have the first typical advice people always give you, I find in financial sectors, is pay down debt first. While I agree with that, this is why it's critical to know what your rates are and all of that stuff that I talked about and negotiate. I do think like that is, but I'm not a big believer in that you have to pay down all your debt before you start saving or before you start investing or before you start going on that vacation that you really want to do. I feel like just focusing on the debt repayment at times can put people in a real scarcity type of position. And we want to work towards moving you much more towards abundance. So, with that said, the four categories are debt repayment, emergency fund, or what I call as the vault. I like to call it the vault. And I'm going to talk about a little bit about that in both your business and your personal finances. Your investment fund, and then there's tithing, and that's gonna be, like, money you wanna give away or money you want to, um, you know, share with someone else or loan to someone else. Sometimes that's the scenario. And then there's the final one is one that, I feel like never gets talked about, but is so important, and that's your fun fund. And this is where, like, put money aside specifically for, like, "Hey, I know we're gonna go on a vacation, and I wanna be able to have money aside to for that vacation, so it's not coming out of my operating expenses or my joint house account that pays all of the necessities." And this gives me a cushion for me to work with, and it also helps me budget for what I can, um, invest in that trip, because I look at it as vacations or even a big event. Maybe it's tickets to a concert, whatever matches your value system here is really huge. So, those are the 5 categories: debt repayment, emergency slash the vault, investment fund, then your tithing, and then, of course, your fun fund. And here is the next step of this exercise. So once you have your statement and you've looked at what you need to, the necessities you need to pay, you have a really good idea of like, hey, here's my base number for my quote budget. And while I'm allergic to that word budget, again, episode for another day. What I want you to think about is that this is what you actually need to spend every month. This is where your utilities are and all these things that need to be paid regardless. And this is basically what your monthly nut is. If you pay for school for your child, I also suggest that you put the necessity of your schooling in the necessity fund, or the necessity category. So, second category being negotiate, and the third one being nice to have. So you're going to start to have an idea of like, hey, this is my monthly nut, and I'm just going to throw arbitrary numbers out there. Let's say it's $5,000 a month, which, God, in this day and age is very, very low, but like $5,000 a month is my monthly baseline nut. That's going to carry over to my emergency fund, right? So that's going to help me set the target for my emergency fund. That emergency fund, I want ideally 6 months of that monthly nut saved. And that's my goal. So I need to start to figure out how much after that monthly nut I'm taking in. What I find here is a lot of people start to realize that they are spending more than they're taking in. And that is not uncommon. I would say that's more common than it's not. And so this is a really good way for us to get really like very vulnerable with our current situation, but also have a place to start from. So the monthly nut is our first number we want to really come out of this. When it comes to negotiation, this is the one that this is gonna be variable, but this is the one that we wanna do some work on within the next 30 days or even the next quarter, when we set these targets. And, the first one that I always tackle and negotiate is our credit cards, because that carries over to debt repayment, right? So, what I find and has definitely held me back at times is that a lot of times is like, it's not fun to start to repay debt. especially when it's stuff that you, um, have used and you're still not using, or you just haven't been able to pay it off. So this is where, again, knowing all the rates and how they work, and then you get a little bit creative with how that works, where you set a target on like, hey, here's how much debt repayment based on my current what's coming in, that I can pay on top of my monthly nut. So in my example, I'm using $5,000 is my monthly nut. And in this case, I'm going to say $2,000 a month is going to be in negotiable things, credit cards. So I could make the choice on credit cards. Do I make my monthly payment or do I pay more than that? Obviously, you want to pay more. In a perfect world, you want to pay off that balance every month, but that is not necessarily easy to do. And a behavior that's consistent for a lot of people. So I want to give you that option here. And then finally, on the nice to have, let's say that you have at the end of the month, let's say you bring in $9,000 a month in household income. And actually, let's make it even. Let's say it's $10,000 a month. So your monthly nut's 5, your negotiations or things that you're spending on that you really, need to look at in terms of the c the connection to the debt repayment is $2,000 a month that you've committed to. So that's $7,000 a month. And then let's say that on average, you're spending another $1,000 a month in, your actual, nice to have categories. So like these are things that like you enjoy having, they're treats for yourself, they're treats for your family. Maybe it's like kids that are, having, they go to gymnastics and they go to swim and they play hockey. And these are all things that are super luxuries that you want them to have. However, they don't need them to survive if you got into a pinch where you were spending more than you're making. So, this might be your monthly massage. This might be a monthly facial. This might be something even for yourself. And while I'm super hesitant, especially with all of our moms, to say cut what your luxury is first, I just want you to bring awareness about what your luxuries are and start to treat it that way, that it is a luxury, or it is something that is special, that is so nice to have, but if you ever got into a serious bind, you knew that you could cut here. So let's say it's another $1,000 in your nice to have category. So between necessities, you have a $5,000 a month nut. Negotiate, you have a $2,000 a month a month nut, and that's with debt repayment included. So you're paying over what your minimums are and in an effort to get to a zero balance on your credit cards. And then the final one is that it's nice to have is you have about $1,000 in expenses on any given month. This is like a new pair of shoes, like I said, and things that you treat yourself to or you treat others in your family to. So let's say you have that's $8,000 and you have $10,000 coming in. You have $2,000 left on any given day. Now, it's really up to you on what your comfort level is. Me personally, like I like to my goal is always to tithe 10%. But there's also other things that you could do here. Like $500, that $2,000 you have left could go into your savings account for your emergency fund if that's something a habit you want to create and you have not hit that 3 to 6 month cushion. Or what you could do is you could put that in an investment account. Maybe you build the emergency fund first because that's more important to you than starting the investment fund. Um, it's really this is where what is left over you get to get a little bit creative with. Maybe you divide it evenly. Maybe you tithe a percentage of it. Maybe you um, save for fun for a vacation a percentage of it. Maybe you save a portion of it in emergency, and maybe you save a portion of it investment. The cool thing is you get to decide how you're going to allocate that leftover money. But the huge thing that you're going to see when you start to do this exercise is that possibly number 1, you're spending more than you're bringing in. And I should also say this too. I do this after taxes. the what I bring in after taxes. So it's not before taxes. So you want to make sure that you have always you're allocating for that too. So you're going to figure out two numbers from this exercise. What are you bringing in after taxes? And what is these three categories that is really what you're spending on any given month? What is your basic nut, your necessities you have? What is the negotiation things that like are on there that you need to pay? There's no options about that, but you can get strategic on what the rates are, how you pay that, and all of that kind of stuff. And then the third thing is going to be your nice to have. And these are gonna be the things that, like I said, when money gets tight one month or you need to spend someplace else, you can actually, go into this, and cut some of these expenses. The other things that, you're gonna get out of here is, like, with what's left over from your spending, where do you want it to go? Do you want it to go in the tithing fund? Do you want it to go into an investment fund because you wanna start investing? Do you want to go it to go into a, uh, what's it called? Oh, man. Emergency fund, the vault. Do you want it to go into the vault? Does it give you such peace of mind to know that the emergency fund has a good cushion for you? And when things pop up, it's okay because you can take care of them from that emergency fund. So just food for thought. This is an exercise, like I said, a money ritual I do once a quarter. I highly recommend you do it in, like I said, once a quarter and you set just an hour to go through it. Because the story I wanted to share at the beginning, I can't remember if I got to it, was that my husband and I were driving in the car and we were talking about doing this exercise. And I had just ran it for our business, one of our businesses. And so we were chatting about some of the things we needed to negotiate. I was asking him, do we use this anymore? Can we get rid of this? And when we did that, I again was not like looking at the actual statement. I was just guesstimating while we were in this conversation in the car. And when I actually printed out the statement and did this exercise in this format, what came out of it was I was drastically off on some numbers, and so was he. And this is when we talked about our personal stuff. We were just kind of guesstimating what our monthly note was at that point and stuff like that. And it it was shocking how much both of us were off, by almost $1,000 each. And, $1,000 each is $2,000 that we're not really accounting or telling how we want it to work. So I just want you to really take the time to do this exercise if this inspires you to really get a handle on like what are you spending and where do you want to save and how do you want to save? It's just a different approach. It's not your traditional approach, but hopefully it's something that maybe you'll give a whirl. Even if you're just thinking about some things, I'm sure if you're driving, probably things came right to your head. But I encourage you to do the physical exercise just like we did, where driving and doing it was not as conducive to the answers we really needed to get, to turn it into information we could use to make some shifts and how we're spending our money. So, thank you so much, you guys, for joining. I hope you have an amazing day and we see you next time. If you liked this episode, please, please, please review it, share it with your friends. Again, my goal is, as your host, is just to start to change that conversation and how you have a relationship with money.